Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very senior and accomplished professional from the world of pharma from Mumbai, India, Mr. Manoj Saxena. Manoj, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashutosh, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Manoj is the country division head of Bayer Pharmaceuticals, and he's the managing director of Bayer Zydus Pharma. Manoj is also very passionate about inclusion and diversity, and we'll speak more about Bayer and inclusion in our conversation. But Manoj, before we talk about anything else, tell me about your own amazing journey.
Thank you, Ashutosh. So when I look back, some of the steps which you have taken professionally were not really planned. Yeah, so I'm a mathematics graduate
Wow.
and with an MBA. And I really never thought that I would join life sciences. I come from my father was in university as professor and dean. So one of the aspect always was that I was, the teaching was a one career option as such. You were always
Mm,
looking at it, but
mm,
somehow I was more attracted to the corporate world.
mm,
Um, and during my childhood, for whatever reasons, my father normally, when you are a professor, you stick to one university, but he kept moving in terms of looking at newer roles, but newer profiles. Yeah. And in that, I was also lived in multiple cities during my childhood, and part of it was also in a boarding school.
mm,
That helped me to to look at the world slightly differently when you are independent at a very early and young stage. and
mm,
and one of the reasons I feel that has helped me is to really be open to new could be ideas, could be movement, could be also geographies.
mm.
I am close to 50 years, 48 to be precise, and I've lived in 24 houses. So virtually
Amazing.
every 2 years I keep on moving.
Mm,
Bulk of my life, as you said, I'm a pharma man, but bulk of my experience in pharma, though I started with FMCG, but got disassociated very quickly, essentially because I wasn't sure about what I'm trying to achieve. Yeah,
mm.
I was looking for a deeper purpose at that point of time, and then I joined Cipla and continued there for close to 13 years, and then close to 13 years now with Bayer. So yeah,
Amazing.
26 years in the pharma. Worked in India, but also a little bit in the Southeast Asian countries. Yeah, so that's the my experience within
Amazing.
the
Amazing.
pharma world. But
A,
still a
math.
learner in the pharma world, and and opportunities like this, whatever experiences learning I have, I can give back to the community. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. For all our viewers and listeners, a mathematician turned pharmaceutical leader is not very easy to meet. So today we've got Manoj in that in that role today. So let's talk a few questions to you about Bayer. And let me start by asking you that uh, Bayer is a global company with a very, very long history. How does the company's global strategy translate into the Indian market?
I think that's very important for any organization, but more for Bayer. We are
Mm,
an organization which is 160 years old.
correct.
And in that, we have been fairly, long in India as well. Last year we celebrated 125 years of being in India.
Wow.
We have been committed, for delivering breakthrough innovations across our, we are a life science company, so across our the industries which we work in, which is healthcare, essentially pharma and consumer health, but also a little bit other things and agriculture. Yeah. And when we look at our global vision, Ashutosh, is health for all,
Mm,
hunger for none. Yeah.
mm,
And we are dedicated in that to bring innovations which can really help patients or societies in treating various diseases
mm,
and ultimately improving the quality of life. And in that, I think the what we are trying to do in India are few things. Yeah, one is all our global, innovations. Yeah,
mm,
and when you look at it as an organization, we look at what is the unmet need in society in India, and we try to bring in all our innovations. For example, last year we brought in three state of the art. First time new launches in India, three products launched in cardiology, in diabetes, and in oncology. So
mm,
that is one. We look at it, what are the unique healthcare challenges in India and how do we address that. So we also look at it, what could be our very adaptive local solutions, yeah, in
Mm,
terms of building awareness, using digital tools. For example, we have pretty sizable and presence in women's health.
mm,
So things like a chatbot, for example, in women, for Indian women,
mm,
because they can't really talk openly about family planning topics. Yeah, so
mm,
having a chatbot, for example. So technology tools around that. Building partnerships, because we also realize in today's world not everything is possible by you yourself,
mm,
right?
mm.
So how do we do partnerships? And as you read out my profile, some would have noticed that I also manage a joint venture with Zydus. Yeah,
Correct.
so we have a joint venture which manages part of our business is
Mm,
called as Bayer Pharma. So collaborations with local entities, whether Zydus, but we also have manufacturing collaborations. We have other collaborations as well. So how
mm,
do we develop partnerships which are especially for India, looking at Indian demographics.
mm,
We
mm.
invest a lot in R&D
Yeah.
as while we commercialize and we are selling. I think it's also important for us as an organization to focus on what are the future needs, what are the unmet needs in the diseases patterns, and
Mm,
how do we continue to innovate and how India can play a role, right? So we
mm,
have an R&D hub in Hyderabad where we employ a large number of people, but we also do a lot of global clinical trials. And last but certainly, as a responsible companies, I think our focus on topics like ESG, sustainability, and India also pivots a lot around it with
mm.
our global sustainability programs, yeah, where
Correct.
India
Correct.
plays an important role.
Correct. Well said. Well said. So my next question to you is that, the entire world of healthcare seems to be, on steroids, if I can use that term, in our country. Everyone's discovered healthcare in the last 10, 12 years. What are some of the key trends that you are noticing in healthcare? And how do you see the future of the pharmaceutical industry in India?
So I think Ashutosh, when we look at and I'm just looking at from a layman perspective, and he opens up a newspaper, he looks at pharma industry from two perspectives. One as an industry, yeah,
Correct.
where we are, India is a global pharmacy, we export a lot. You've seen that,
Mm,
the manufacturing of vaccines during COVID time. I think India is playing an important role to be a global pharmacy with our manufacturing capabilities and our strong chemistry
mm,
of making the drugs for the world. Yeah.
mm.
And then the second part is our whole focus on what are the challenges in India from a healthcare perspective from our own needs. Yeah.
Correct.
Uh, let's list down the first challenge. I think, we look at 1947 when we got our independence, our
Mm.
life expectancy was 32 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And courtesy the various stakeholders playing their role, pharmaceutical industry as well. Today, our life expectancy is somewhere around, estimates are between 70 to 72 years, right? So
Correct.
we have more than doubled.
Mm,
Yeah. Yet there are challenges remaining in it. I think the first is the as we will mimic the developed world, we will also take up the diseases. Yeah. So
mm,
India, as it gets into aging population, we are already seeing India as a diabetic capital of the world.
mm,
We are getting cardiovascular diseases and a lot of other diseases which are coming at a much younger population in India. Yeah.
mm,
So I think that is a challenge in India. How do we look at chronic diseases, including oncology, including other diseases, and how do we address those burden? Yeah.
mm,
The second is around access to healthcare. Yeah.
mm,
Sometimes we know the access to healthcare is only looked at from the cost of medicine. Yeah.
mm,
But actually, the access to healthcare challenge in India or across the globe is multifactorial. Having the right set of doctors, having the facilities where they can diagnose early, having the awareness among the community so that they understand whom to approach, when to approach, adherence to therapies, adherence to consultation,
right.
counseling. Yeah. So the whole, I think that is a challenge.
Mm,
How do we integrate digital? Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the one of the social media apps which can really help in propagating any message.
mm,
So I think how
mm,
do we use digital across the board? We know there is a India, there is a Bharat, and there is something in between. Yeah, so I think that is also a challenge.
mm,
Um,
mm,
navigating in a complex marketplace like pharma, which is quite regulated. how does the policy keep space with the changes which is happening? And I'll give
Mm,
you example. We were all started with small molecules. We have seen or large molecules, which is like a pill or a tablet.
mm, mm,
But as we are moving into future, we are talking about cell and gene, yeah,
mm,
therapies. We are talking of targeted therapies. We are talking of very different way of giving drugs which are personalized medical care. How do
mm,
we take care of our policies, regulations which are at par with them?
mm,
And lastly, I think one of the areas where India needs to focus on, while we have done a fair bit of work in terms of our manufacturing capabilities, is our focus on innovation. Now, how
mm,
do we spend right amount of focus and incentivizing that from our capability to develop and research, and I think those are the some of the
mm,
challenges.
mm. Well, that's a great response. Thank you. Uh, you also mentioned that you are involved in a lot of ESG related work and so on. But my question is that you're also involved in a lot of CSR activities.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about some of your CSR projects.
Yeah, so yeah, I think any responsible organization, Ashutosh, looks at how do we give back to the community where we are present. Yeah,
Right.
and I think that has been our work around CSR, that we, since our major area is healthcare. How do we look at healthcare challenges and spend our CSR budgets around that? Just to highlight some of it, I guess what we are setting it up, and you would have seen maybe in the news as well, we are setting up many telecenter units,
Yeah.
close to almost 27, 28 telemedicine center, which are in the remote locations in India.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
The idea is to really look at how do we give quality healthcare, bringing specialists which are virtually not there in those localities in tier 3, tier 4 cities,
mm,
and linking it up with technology platform, right? So we are partnering with RxDX and Piramal Health Foundation
mm.
to really give cutting edge consultations to the communities which are devoid of it. Yeah.
Right.
And the response has been tremendous. Yeah, so that is one. Similar are our programs to really upgrade villages in Maharashtra, where we had over now 15,000 people coming in those programs to really modernize and see how do we build the ecosystem. Yeah.
Mm, mm,
So that's where been our focus has been on health and
mm,
education to really look at our CSR
mm.
initiatives.
Fascinating. So, one more question related to Bayer, and then I'll move to inclusion and diversity. You have a very, very diverse portfolio of products, from pharmaceuticals to crop science. As a leader, how do you balance your own time to manage different businesses which are spread across the whole country?
Yeah. So just to clarify, Ashutosh, I had only pharma business. I don't had crop science,
Okay.
which gives us the opportunity to really look at in a very very focused manner.
Mm,
At the end of the day, what we are trying to do is, when we say with a vision of health for all, hunger for none,
mm,
our perspective is how do we, what we do makes an impact on the society. Yeah,
mm,
how we can look at giving them a better life. How do we bring in our innovative products, cutting edge technologies, so that the customer needs are better served. And in that, you are right. Once you have a diverse portfolio, you don't apply one approach to all. You
mm.
look at it, what works well in each country, and I think we
Correct.
are reasonably decentralized to have businesses or business units or go-to-market approaches which are tailor-made, suited for those patient groups. Yeah. So at
Mm,
the end, our focus is on, if we are present in diabetes, at the end, our focus is that the diabetic patient
mm,
gets the best treatment. He understands what disease he is having. He feels
mm,
empowered to get to the right treatment, and
mm,
in that, Bayer solution helps him. Is good. Yeah.
mm,
So in that context, our organizational structures are pretty decentralized to look at it, what the demands of that therapeutic area are,
mm.
and important stakeholders like HCPs would, and then accordingly we see how do we manage it. Yeah.
Interesting. So let's now talk a little bit about diversity, equity, inclusion. I mean, ever since the SDG started talking about DEI, the whole world is talking about it. And in India, of course, we've had it for thousands of years. But I wanted to ask you that since you're so passionate about inclusion and diversity, what are you doing within your organization to promote DEI, and how are you measuring and tracking it?
Yeah, no, I think that's a important question for us. So we take DEI extremely uh, as important as our business goals,
Mm,
to be honest.
mm,
Yeah, and we would like that to build a culture where DEI becomes part of the DNA.
mm,
So really celebrating our diverse identities in diversity, in giving fairness and justice through equity, and also every single employee as well as our partners, yeah, and the society where we work in, we value everyone and we really welcome everyone. So through the
mm,
inclusivity. Now, what we are trying to do in with that is uh, couple of things internally. How do we organize ourselves? Yeah. So
mm,
having laid out the aspirations while the KPI uh, terms we don't want to use really on the DEI, but
mm,
our aspirations with our goals, both short term, mid term to long term goals,
mm,
are outlined, and there is leadership commitment.
mm,
We have global councils, and we have also communities. We have BRG, which are business resource groups within the organizations, which we are really fostering, yeah, and sponsoring. So while I'm on the global council for DEI, for Bayer, we also have a community which I'm the sponsor in India, which is called as Infinitus, where
mhm,
everybody can come in and support the initiatives on DEI.
mm,
We actively look at it, how what is our leadership's commitment towards DEI in terms of their business objectives. So we also bring in sort of KPIs, which
mhm,
also helps them to keep on track, but they
mm,
also know where do we want to head and what needs to be built in. We also have stand programs where people understand, like, removing the bias. So that sort of a training, an onboarding program is there for every employee.
mm,
Plus, we really foster, the Infinitus as a community and the BRGs to do changes what are needed to do from a policy perspective. Yeah. So policies for working mothers, for example. Yeah.
mm,
Policies for differently abled. Yeah. How can we look at it? So these are the BRGs also help us to really do changes in our policy, which could then enable,
mm,
yeah, that we have a higher gender ratio, we have higher
mm,
people from differently able and things like that. Yeah.
mm. Well said. My next question is, that there is a lot of talk about DEI, but when I speak to a lot of women board members, many people tell me that we are included, but we don't have a voice around the board table. So my question is, how can companies ensure that DEI is not just a buzzword or not just a box checking exercise?
Mm. Yeah, I think that is important, for many things, yeah, where people think these as initiatives as this program. Yeah. At Bayer, we see DEI as an enabler for and the reason for our uh, being there for last 160 years. Yeah. So we want to integrate in our DNA. Our value system is a acronym of LIFE, Ashutosh, which is L stands for leadership, I for integrated, F for flexibility, and D for efficiencies. And we feel that the DEI is embedded in that in that value system. And if we have that integrated in the value system, that buzzword, just a check mark, doesn't really, because people see that in these are influencing our policies.
Mm,
These are influencing our check-ins, our dialogues.
mm,
These are influencing our talent management. These are influencing our recruitment policies. These are if influence, So in that context, people are seeing the way we operate on day-to-day business well deep is part of that framework.
mm.
And so I hope that not everyone views it as a buzzword, and gradually, but things are changing,
Absolutely.
fast,
Mm,
not just in Bayer, but I can also say, recently I attended a conference which was focused on DEI. And so I think things are progressing very, very fast, and which is very good. Yeah, which is
mm,
very good. And we acknowledge that, within the organization, but also outside. And as Bayer as a leader, what we can do to be really proactive there.
mm.
And I think you are right there. So it should not be a buzzword.
I agree. Thank you. My next question is that based on your own journey, what personal experiences or insights have you gained from your own DEI journey, and how have they influenced you as a leader today?
Uh, a lot actually, Ashutosh. Yeah. So early on, when I started my journey in '97, I had the opportunity to really, at an early stage to go to Chennai. Yeah, and I lived there for 1.5, 2 years.
Mm.
I did not know Tamil language. At that point of time, being a North Indian, it appeared that Tamil Nadu is a different planet. We are talking of days there were no internet, yeah. So you do not have GPS, you can't
Yeah.
Google anything. I
Mm.
mean, virtually you have to figure out yourself, right?
Mm.
And in that, getting into a leadership role where you have people who come from a slightly different context, helped me to really look at both diversity of thoughts, yeah, and how can I be inclusive. And I think that was my life changing model, which helped me to really do well when I traveled to countries like Vietnam or Malaysia or Singapore, which essentially is speaking 99% of the people in Vietnam are speaking in Vietnamese, right? So how do
Mm.
you operate in that?
Correct.
So I think that leadership lesson for me was how can you be empathetic, how can you be authentic, how can you be have active listening skills
Mm.
while you are working with people who think very differently, and how you
Mm.
can really leverage those strength of diversity
Correct.
and being inclusive. Yeah.
Correct.
So that I think was definitely one thing
Mm.
which that the from a DEI perspective came to me.
Yeah, that's a great example. I remember when I first went to Singapore in 89, I made the mistake of telling a Singaporean young executive, listen, I can't understand what you are saying. And she was a young 22-year-old girl, and she told me, Mr. Gare, I don't understand what you are saying.
Yeah.
And that gave me for the first time an understanding that, listen, we are all different and we have to respect one another. Thank you. Great example. Manoj, my last question to you, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own amazing journey and right to the very top, what would you say are three lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from your journey and from our conversation?
I think three things which I reflect on myself, and I mean, success is not an end post which we are looking at.
Mm.
First thing being open, yeah.
Mm.
For example, taking the role in Chennai or going to
Mm.
Vietnam.
Yeah.
Some of these moves, at an early stage may not
Mm.
be something where people would say, does it make sense, yeah,
Mm.
professionally, because these were out of the box thinking, yeah. So being
Mm.
open, and taking up whatever comes and doing your best. Being authentic, I think, sometimes we say we have to use corporate jargons, or we have to, put a face in our workplace. I think to me, authentic leadership has definitely helped. Yeah.
Yeah.
So being authentic in whatever you do, and if you
Mm.
align your purpose
Mm.
with the organization purpose, if you create a win-win for
Mm.
yourself, for
Mm.
the organization, I think you would also grow. So if you are growing the organization, you would also grow.
Correct.
And lastly is I think self-belief. I come from a very small place, is a small city. Yeah.
Mm.
So my childhood, bulk of the days was in Srinagar and then in Dehradun.
Mm.
Uh, Coming from those cities, sometimes when you travel to cities like Mumbai or Delhi, and I'm
Mm.
talking of 80s and 90s, and
Correct.
maybe Ashutosh, you're much elder to me.
Mm.
You have inferiority complex. For example, yeah. And when you look at large corporate houses, and you come from a place where you have not seen an elevator
Mm.
operate, yeah,
Mm.
having that sort of a self belief that yes, it is possible to grow, yes, you can do it. I think is also a message to everyone who come from small states in India. As
Mm.
India is growing and we are,
Mm.
at a rapid growth, the ability for us, to grow from wherever we come, whether we come from the large city like Mumbai or Chennai or from a small city, I think that self belief is important. Yeah.
Mm. Well said. And on that note, Manoj, and your three amazing lessons, be open to take any kind of roles, which also tells me be ready to take risks in your careers. Second, you said was be authentic and align your purpose with that of the organization. And the third one is have self-belief, and the fact that you were able to talk about some of your own uh, concerns that you addressed when you were very young shows me how much self-belief you have, because you were ready to speak about it on an open platform. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. Thank you for talking to me about a lot of the things that you're doing at Bayer. And thank you for talking to me about your own beliefs in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Thanks a lot. It was wonderful to speak to you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.